Think about the last time you were in a room and someone walked in, said very little, and somehow the entire energy of the space shifted around them. Not the loudest person, not the one performing the most enthusiasm, just someone whose presence alone made people sit up slightly straighter. Meanwhile, somewhere else in your memory, there's the opposite person, talking constantly, laughing the hardest, working visibly hard to be noticed, and somehow still fading into the background. If you've ever wondered why effort and presence don't seem to correlate the way you'd expect, you're about to find out why. And it's going to change how you walk into every room for the rest of your life. Welcome back to Mindstick. Today we're breaking down the actual psychology behind commanding presence, not fake confidence, not performed charisma, but the specific researched behaviors that make certain people register as someone worth paying attention to before they've said a single word. Stick around, because the last piece of this is the one habit almost nobody associates with confidence at all, and it's usually the most powerful one in the room. Let's start with the research that explains why this happens so fast. Psychologist Nalini Ambady spent years studying what she called thin slicing, the brain's ability to form accurate judgments about a person's status, competence, and trustworthiness from just a few seconds of observation, often without any words exchanged at all. Her studies found that people could predict things like teaching effectiveness or negotiation outcomes from silent video clips just a few seconds long, with striking accuracy. The implication is uncomfortable if you've been relying on what you say to build your presence. By the time you've finished your first sentence, a room has often already decided how much weight to give you, based entirely on things that had nothing to do with your words. So if it's not what you say, what is it? Let's go through it. Sign 1. They take up their space slowly, not quickly. Watch how a genuinely confident person moves into a room. They don't rush to their seat. They don't fill every gap with movement or noise. There's a kind of unhurried quality to how they occupy space, and it's not accidental. Researchers studying nonverbal dominance behavior, including work compiled by psychologist Judith Hall, have consistently found that reduced fidgeting and slower, more deliberate movement reads as higher status, while quick, anxious, over-adjusting movement reads as lower status, almost universally across cultures. The mechanism is simple once you see it. Urgency signals a need for approval. Stillness signals that approval was never really in question. The cost of not knowing this is that a lot of people work incredibly hard to seem confident through energy and motion, when the nervous system in the room is actually reading all that motion as the opposite signal. Sign 2. Their voice drops instead of rising under pressure. Here's where it gets specific. Political scientist Casey Klofstad has run multiple studies on vocal pitch and leadership perception, and found something remarkably consistent. Both men and women with lower-pitched voices are rated as more dominant, more competent, and more trustworthy as leaders. And in real-world election studies, candidates with lower voice pitch actually won more often. Now, most people can't permanently change their pitch, but here's the part that matters. Pitch rises involuntarily under stress, nerves, or the need to be liked. People who read as confident have usually trained themselves, often unconsciously, to keep their voice low and level exactly when the moment tempts it to climb. That control, not the pitch itself, is what a room is actually detecting. Sign 3. They pause before responding and let the pause sit. Most people treat silence in conversation as an emergency that needs to be filled immediately. Watch someone with real presence get asked a hard question. There's a pause, sometimes a full second or two, before they answer. Communication researchers studying hesitation and perceived competence have found that filled pauses, the ums, the rushed immediate answers, the visible scramble to respond, consistently lower how competent and confident a speaker is perceived to be, even when the actual content of what they say doesn't change. A clean pause reads as someone who thinks before they speak. A rushed answer, however articulate, reads as someone speaking to escape the discomfort of silence. The cost of not knowing this is brutal. A lot of genuinely intelligent people undersell themselves constantly simply because they can't tolerate a 2-second gap in conversation. Pattern interrupt, because here's where this stops being about behavior and starts being about something deeper. Sign 4. They don't perform reactions, they have them late. Watch someone with commanding presence receive news, good or bad. There's often a small delay before the reaction shows on their face, not because they're hiding anything, but because they're actually processing before responding, rather than performing a reaction in real time to manage how the room sees them. This connects to something psychologist Daryl Bem described in his self-perception theory back in the 1960s. People don't just express internal states, they infer their own internal states partly from watching their own behavior. Someone who's trained themselves out of instant reactive performance isn't just seeming calmer to others. Over time, the delayed, deliberate response actually makes them calmer internally because they stop generating the anxious feedback loop of performing anxiety and then reading their own performance as evidence they should be anxious. Sign 5. They ask questions they actually want answered. This is the one almost nobody expects, and it might be the most important on this list. People assume commanding presence comes from talking, from having answers, from filling the room with your own certainty. But watch the people who genuinely make rooms go quiet with attention. And you'll notice they ask fewer questions than average, but the ones they ask are sharper, more specific, and clearly come from real curiosity rather than social obligation. This ties back to Ambady's thin-slicing research. Attention itself is a status signal. Someone who is comfortable enough in their own standing doesn't need to prove anything by talking. They can afford to spend their attention on you, and a room reads that spare, generous attention as a form of power because scarcity of anything, including someone's focus, is read by the human brain as valuable. Now here's the paradox that ties all 5 of these together, and it's the part I most want you to walk away with. Every single one of these behaviors, the slower movement, the lower and steadier voice, the tolerated pause, the delayed reaction, the sparing but genuine attention, is, on the surface, about doing less. Not less substance, not less intelligence, not less warmth, less performance, less urgency, less need to immediately, visibly prove your value in the moment. And that's exactly why most advice about confidence fails, because it tells people to do more, talk more, smile more, assert more, perform more energy. Real presence runs in almost the opposite direction. It's the nervous system's way of communicating, without a single word, I don't need this room's approval to know my own value. And paradoxically, that is the exact quality every room is most drawn to. None of this is about becoming cold or withholding warmth. The goal was never to seem unbothered or distant. It's about removing the layer of performance that anxiety adds on top of who you actually are, so what's left is simply you, unhurried, unrehearsed, and fully present, which turns out to be far more magnetic than anything you could perform on top of it. So tell me, which of these 5 did you recognize, either in yourself or in someone whose presence has always stuck with you? The slow movement, the steady voice, the tolerated pause, the delayed reaction, or the sparing attention? Drop the number in the comments. And if this changed how you think about walking into your next room, subscribe to Mindstick, because we're just getting started decoding the hidden mechanics of how people are actually perceived. Thank you for being here. Goodbye, and see you next time.